This is Advanced World Building, the first in a series of events that I'm going to be holding, workshops on. And I'm going to stop right there because I really don't like the word advanced. I mean, it sort of implies that you have to have done something before you get to this point, or that you have some previous knowledge before you get to this point. And it's really not any more advanced than the rest of the worlds that we see and other kinds of worlds that we have available to us on Altspace. It's just a little bit different, right? I'm using all of the tools that I have available to me to build my worlds, and that's what I'm going to be sharing with you is the tools that I use, the workflow that I use. And I can't promise it's going to be the best workflow. It's the workflow that works for me. But these are the tools that everybody has available to us. And there are some amazing worlds on Altspace that are not built with the techniques that I'm going to be going over. So I just want to disabuse this notion that this is sort of like a higher level of world building. It's just different world building with all of the ingredients. So welcome. And on that note, this is a repeat performance of what I did on Thursday afternoon. Hopefully it'll go better than the one on Thursday afternoon did. I'll be having the first episode, the first session on Thursday afternoons, and I'll be doing the repeats on Monday mornings. I'm getting some interest on a Saturday morning class, so I may change or add a Saturday morning slot to this if that works out well. The Another thing is I don't mute the audience. We had a really respectful group. You guys look like a nice professional crowd. So I'm not going to mute the audience. If you have any questions, hand raises are enabled. You can let me know with a hand raise, or you just, get my attention or something. I've got no problem with breaking the flow of the conversation to address a question if something comes up. So over the next few weeks, this is a brief list of some. It's certainly not an inclusive list of all the different topics that I'm going to be covering. This is sort of an introductory session here. Next week, or actually this week on Thursday, I'm going to be talking about setting up Unity, setting up your project, what you have to do to get everything ready to build something for Altspace. How do you configure your tools, and then how do I work with the settings to get everything to build right. We're also going to be talking about optimizing our world. We'll probably be talking about optimization a little bit in every session because it's so important, and everything else impacts optimizing our world. I'm going to be looking at 3D Studio. I know a lot of people don't have access to 3D Studio, but that's the tool that I'm familiar with. And hopefully I'll be talking about concepts and techniques that can be translated into other modeling packages such as Blender. So if you're working with Blender, hopefully you get some information out of the 3D Studio material that I'm going to be covering, because the concepts are the same. Materials and shaders are an important conversation. We're going to be talking a lot about making a surface look a certain way or react a certain way, or I put this particle system in my world and now my frame rate's gone down to 15 frames a second. What's up with that? It may be a problem with the material or the shader that you're using. So we're going to be looking at that sort of stuff. And then along the way, I'm going to be talking about tips, tricks, best practices, things that you can follow, that you can watch out for as you're moving along through this journey. So, pizza. Getting right into the pizza. Used the pizza analogy the other day. It worked really well, I thought. So a world in Altspace is an awful lot like a pizza, right? I have a template, and I have objects on top of that template, and my template is sort of like the crust, right? My objects are the things that are sitting on top of the crust, right? So if the template of my world is my crust, the objects are on top of the world, the addings that I want to the world, that give the world the flavor, the pepperoni, the bell pepper, the spices, that sort of stuff that I put on there. Hey, Finn, can you back up please a little bit? Yeah. Now, if I want a pizza, right, I can get a pizza really easily. I go to Domino's, and I can go to Papa John's, and I can order one of their pizzas, and it will come, and it'll be hot, and it'll be delicious, and it'll be filling, and it'll be somebody else's pizza. I've got no control over what goes in the crust. I got no control over what they put in the sauce, or the cheese, or the toppings, or any of that other stuff. But I get my pizza. It's quick, it's efficient, and it gets the job done. But let's say I really want control over my pizza, or I want a little bit different pizza. Then I got different options. I can go to someplace like Papa Murphy's, where they'll give me the pizza I want. I take it home and bake it. I feel like I'm doing a little bit more because I do an extra step. Or I can start making my own pizza. I can get a crust, and I can make my own toppings and put that on it. And then I can start looking into what makes a good crust. I can start working on my own crust. And this is all a personal journey. This is exactly what I did. I learned how to make crust, find out what's the difference between pizza dough and bread dough. You know, a pizza crust is not just a big round loaf of bread, right? It's different, right? And that's when I find out that making a perfect pizza crust takes 2 days. To really get the crust just right, it takes 2 days. And then I can make my own sauce. If I'm making my own sauce from scratch, that can take all day, depending on the level of control that I want to put into it. I can make my own cheese. Mozzarella cheese is real easy to make. I can make mozzarella cheese in about an hour and have complete, absolute control over my pizza because everything, every ingredient, every technique that goes into that is mine, is under my control. And that's sort of what world building is like. I can go and I can use a stock template. I can use one of Altspace's template. I can use some of their kits. And I can build my world, and it's a custom world, and it's exactly the way I want it, but I'm using everybody else's ingredients. So the point of all this is how do I get to where I'm making my own ingredients? I want to make my own pizza crust. I want to make my own pepperoni. I want to make my own cheese, my own sauce. I'll probably grow the chives and I'll chop and put on it as well. Just to get that level of control. Right? Maybe there's a particular effect that I want. Maybe there's a particular purpose that I want my world to have. And that none of the worlds that are available to me. Is anybody else having a hard time hearing me? Am I breaking up on you?
A little bit.
A little bit?
Kind
Just
of.
a little.
It's like that.
Okay, let me know if it gets to be a problem, and I'll re-enter. Yeah. Seems like we've been having a lot of audio issues in here lately. So, all right, just let me know if anything like that happens. So, when it comes to the toppings on our pizza, right? What kind of stuff do we have available to us that we can work with Altspace? The tools that we have to make this sort of limited, right? We got to work within the tools that we have. So there's a lot of stuff that we can make, and there's some stuff that we can't make. We can add our own materials. We can add our own shaders. We can add our own sounds. We can do level of detail things. We can have animations. To a certain extent, we can have physics in here. And if I'm working in a template, I've actually got 2 different lighting systems available to me. Okay, I'm hearing that the sound is getting really bad. So I will be right back.
Yep.
Much.
Okay. I apologize about that, but sometimes that happens. Okay, so we were talking about the ingredients that we can put on our pizza, the stuff that we have available to us that Unity gives us that we can add either as an object in our world or to the templates that we're building our world on. Right, so we've got materials and shaders that we can use. We've got sound effects, music that we can put in here. We've got animations that we can build that we can incorporate into our objects and into our scenes. To a certain extent, we've got a little bit of physics that we can add with certain restrictions. And then if I'm working in the template, right, I've got access to 2 different lighting systems. There's a real-time lighting system that colors our avatars and colors the objects, and it can change and it can move, and I can do all sorts of different stuff with it. But there's another lighting system that works on the template that's called baked lighting. Baked lighting only works within the template. I can't add baked lighting to a object because things that are baked lit can't move. They have to be absolutely static. So I can do things like the shadows on the buildings and the glows coming off of emissive textures and the shadows in the corners where things come together, well, which is what they call ambient occlusion, where 2 things join. That lighting level, that layer of lighting, is compiled by Unity when I build my scene and upload it into Altspace VR. It's calculated and it's figured out on my computer before I even compile the world, so it can only be done once. It can't change. It's absolutely static. But you can get some really good results with that. And if you use the two lighting systems together, you keep in mind what one is doing when you're designing the other, then you can get a fairly realistic looking real time effect where it looks like we're being lit by the lights that are in the environment. And it looks like our avatars belong in the environment based on the lighting. In this world, for instance, there actually are no light objects. All of the light is coming from the ambient lighting system, which is based off of a gradient. And I got the gradient values from the skybox around us. So I sort of figured out what the light coming from the sky would look like, and that's what's coloring our avatars. And then there's baked lighting on the template, where the emissive lights and the skybox itself go into determining what color everything is and where the shadows need to go, and then that never changes. But there are no lights in here. There's not a point light, not a direct light, not a spotlight. It's all from the materials and the gradient of the ambient lighting. So that's probably a subject that we're going to be spending a lot of time talking over, looking at lots of examples. And then we're going to be talking about the sandbox, which I guess for the sake of this analogy, but probably ought to be a pizza box. But it's called a sandbox because that's a pretty common technical term. A sandbox in software parlance is a restricted area that another piece of software can run inside, but not get out of. It's not even aware of what's outside of that sandbox. And our worlds in Altspace operate in a very similar sandbox. That sandbox is the Altspace client, and that whole Altspace system itself. Our worlds have to fit into that, sort of like a DVD player fitting into a DVD fitting into a DVD player, if you don't mind me mixing metaphors here. But the world has to be compiled and configured so that the Altspace client can understand what's going on in the world. And the Altspace client sort of defines what's possible. It restricts what's possible within that sandbox. There's numbers of reasons for Altspace setting up its sandbox the way that they have. And a lot of it goes back to supporting mobile devices. Like we're still playing with the same sandbox that Altspace had when it supported the Gear VR. So these numbers and these values and these restrictions are really based towards supporting mobile devices like a Gear or a Go or something. Hopefully, over time, these restrictions will increase as the Quest becomes the base platform. But a lot of these are geared towards supporting the mobile platforms, because certainly if you were on a PC, well, not only would it be unrealistic for me to try to impose a hardware restriction on everybody, but I've got a lot more power on a PC, so I can have a much bigger sandbox on my computer than I can on a Quest. And we'll be looking at this graphic or other graphics like it again. But suffice it to say that for right now, we've got a tiny little box that we need to fit our pizza worlds into, and everything that we do, everything that we add, is probably going to make that world heavier and heavier. So what are the ingredients that we're going to have to make these pizzas? And what kind of equipment do we have to have? We need special ovens or mitts or mixing bowls. What do we need? So you're going to need 3D models, textures, and sound, basically assets to work with. And we're going to be talking about a lot of different ways of getting these 3D models. If you've got 3D modeling experience, or you have somebody on your team with 3D modeling experience, then you can make your own 3D models. But if you can't make your own 3D models, and a lot of people are in a position where they just don't have either the skill nor the time to develop the skill, because 3D modeling is a pretty complex skill. But if you know just a few tools and just a few tricks, you can take somebody else's 3D model, and maybe you can't change it exactly the way you want, but you'll be able to tell if it'll work for you or not, or if it'll work better for you than another 3D model. But you're going to need 3D models, textures, and sounds if you want to do sounds, right? But if I want 3D, if I want to make geometry and things that move and things that I can clamp on, 3D models and textures. You're also going to need a very specific version of the Unity game engine. You want Unity 3D 2019.2.12 with Android support. And Thursday afternoon, I'm going to show you, and also next Monday, show you exactly where to get this version of Unity, how to get the Android to support, and how to configure it to work on your PC. And then you'll need the Altspace Unity uploader. And if you've ever built a kit or a template, you know exactly what I'm talking about with this. But the Unity uploader is it's an asset package that I can add to Unity, so it adds functionality to the Unity game engine. It's not a separate application on its own. It's controls and scripts and a menu that gets added to the Unity editor that gives Unity the ability to compile these templates and compile these kits and upload them to Altspace. So we'll need to get that. I'll show you how to set that up and how to configure that, because it's got a lot of special settings in it. Normally it sets itself just right. If you just install it and leave it alone, 9 times out of 10, it's going to work out really well for you. But if you need to change some of the settings, or one of the settings gets changed on you, you'll need to know which ones are the most important and how to set them back. In addition to that, you are going to need a pretty good PC. I've had a lot of people ask me, well, can we do this on a Mac? Yeah, you can do it on a Mac, right? You can get Unity to run on a Mac. I can get all these tools to run on a Mac. So yeah, you can get it to run on a Mac. The modeling software can be 3D Studio, it could be Blender, it could be SketchUp, it could be there's all sorts of OpenCAD, SolidWorks, Softimage, Maya, many different 3D modeling packages are available to us in a wide variety of prices. Maybe all you need is to open a model that I got. Maybe all I need to do is open a model that I got from somebody, maybe delete something or move something, or maybe just convert it to a different file format. We're going to be looking at how to do some of that stuff along the way. How do I manage my models? And model management really is important. When I was working with Brex on the Ghostbusters world, we would find many different objects that we were looking for, like a Slimer. We knew we wanted a Slimer that flew around through the thing and made all sorts of noise and left gas trails and stuff behind it, but we had to find a model for Slimer. We found a really great one on Sketchfab for free. It was 36 megabytes. That one model of Slimer is bigger than the entire sandbox that we have to work with. So that, as great as it looked, it wasn't going to work. We had to keep looking till we found a Slimer that was small enough, light enough to work well in our template and not drag the thing down. And that's an important part of the workflow, is evaluating the models that I get and evaluating the textures that I get, and keeping an eye on the performance hit that's going to have. Everything that I add to a world and everything that I make happen in a world adds to the weight of that world. It adds to the processing power that world requires, and the overhead that your device has in order to display that world. And sometimes you go into a world and everything looks real jittery, and why is everything stuttering? And well, maybe that world is only getting 15 frames a second, and you're going to notice that you're only getting 15 frames a second. Whereas if your world is getting a nice butter smooth 60 frames a second, you get a completely different experience. So those are all things that are important to keep in mind when I'm evaluating the models and evaluating the assets that I want to bring in, right? Let's say I wanted a soundtrack to play in this world. Well, I can get music files, right? Music files have size just like any other file, and the size of those music files are going to add to the weight of my world. So I have to be selective about my music. I can't just download an entire album at full stereo quality, because it's gonna blow out the weight of my world. So those are all things that are important to keep in mind. And then if you're doing something with textures, you're probably going to need some way to edit the textures. Photoshop, Microsoft Paint, um, GIMP. GIMP is another one that's really popular, absolutely free. Got a bit of a learning curve. And then altvr.com itself is a tool that we're going to be using when you're creating worlds, you're uploading your templates, you're adding your templates to your worlds, and you're adding your worlds to events, and all that stuff happens through altvr.com. And my particular workflow, I rely heavily on altvr.com because even though the uploader gives me the option to build and upload in Unity in one step, I typically don't do that because when I upload the world directly to altvr.com, I get feedback on what's wrong, if anything is wrong. If there's a script that made its way into the template, altvr.com will tell me that there's a script in the template, whereas if I do the build and upload from inside of Unity, it just fails, and I don't know why it failed. So a lot of times I will take the two-step process of building my world first, and then I upload it through the website so that I know it uploaded at least. I know that, I get some sanity check, get some feedback on it. Talking a little bit about the difference between kits and objects, right? Kits, the toppings on our pizza, right? They can be randomly placed, and they can be moved around, and they can be spawned in any particular time that we want. And even so, this is an object from a kit. It is a kit that I made, and these are objects that I made, and I just spawned them into this world. So it's sort of analogous to me taking a slice of pepperoni pie and grabbing a nice big bottle of Tabasco and just sprinkling it all over it, because who doesn't like Tabasco on their pizza, right? Now, what's interesting about this object actually has a light in it. Notice how everybody looks different now that I brought this in here. It's because this sun object is actually casting off light. And if the light in the environment wasn't so bright, we would see that the cities on the dark side of the earth are lit up in the shadow of the sun. So those are the effects well, not all of the effects, but they're typical of the effects that I can give my objects. And what separates this object from the template is that I can delete it, I can move it around, I can resize it, but it still adds to the weight of the world. Not only does it add to the weight of the world, everything else in the same kit as this thing is now added to the weight of this world, because I can't just take a single object out of the kit. That's kind of the nature of kits, is the entire kit goes. So if I have one object out of a kit, and this is true for everybody that sees that object, I have to download and load the entire kit. So kit management is important. Kit management is really important, and probably another one of the reasons that I want to work with these tools and build worlds this way, because part of my workflow is I will make a kit that's got the objects in it that I need for a specific world. I build my templates and I build my kits to match, because I have such a small sandbox that I have to fit in. I don't want to blow out the weight of my world with objects and kits that I'm not using. So I try to design my kits to be very, very small and very specific to a function that a particular world works. Templates, on the other hand, they cannot be changed. They can't be moved. If I want to make a change to a template, I have to drop back out to Unity and recompile the whole thing. Maybe I have to rebake my lighting. Depending on the change, I may have to go all the way back to something like 3D Studio or Photoshop to make that change and have that change propagate all the way up through here. So templates are a lot more rigid, right? But templates have some really big advantages. I have a lot more control over where people go in my templates. For no particular purpose, I decided that in this world, I didn't want anybody to be able to teleport onto any of the black squares. So feel free to try it if you want. You can't teleport onto any of the black squares around the space. And that's because that particular geometry is on a different layer. If I'm going to teleport onto an object, I have to make sure that that object has some sort of collider on it so that Unity knows it's solid. And then it has to be on a special layer. It has to be on layer 14. Don't worry, we'll talk about layers later, but it has to be on a particular layer. The Unity uploader, by default, moves everything to that layer because they're assuming, for simplicity's sake, that everybody's going to want to be able to teleport on everything. But I can control that behavior, and I can put things on a different layer if I have some place that I don't want people to go. For instance, I don't want people going on top of that big Rolo-shaped building there. So it's not on layer 14. The pylons over there are not on layer 14. The stuff behind the stage is not on layer 14. So I can control where people go and where people can't. And I can do that because I made the template. Now, working with a template, though, is really different, right? I say on this picture over here that working with objects is like designing from the inside out. And it really is, right? I'm in this space, and I'm surrounded by this space, and I'm immersed in the space, and everything that I'm putting, I have an immediate sense of scale. And I'm surrounding myself with these objects, and I'm always aware of what these objects look like from the inside. But when I'm working with a template, I'm designing from the outside in. I start off at a 30,000 foot altitude, and I usually start by designing the skybox. So when I'm designing something, like I said, from the outside in, right? Like with this world, I got the skybox, right? And that's what I'm starting with is the skybox. And I'm deciding the color of the skybox and the layout and how that's going to affect the entire world. And then I start working on this space. And what I discover when I get back into this space is that everything is just absolutely massive. Absolutely massive. Because when I'm designing from that scale, when I'm designing from that far out, I really don't have a sense of what it's going to be like to be in this space until I get into this space. It was something that really struck me with the Ghostbusters, is that I can work on something and I can design it and I can retool it over and over and over, but until I get inside it and look at it from the inside, I really don't know what it looks like. And that's one of the challenges. Is one thing another thing we're going to be talking a lot is how do I design from the outside in, right? How do I conceive of not just the world that I want to go in, but the entire reality in which that world exists? It sounds very deep and metaphysical, doesn't it? But it's not really that bad. So this image is captured from 3D Studio, and this is what this world looks like in 3D Studio. I work in something like 3D Studio to lay out the basic geometry and define where I want the materials to go, but I don't do the materials until I get it to Unity. So everything looks big and blocky and the solid cartoony colors. And the only thing I need the materials for in my modeling package is to differentiate that this is one material and this is another material. Because I'm not really going to care what that material is or what that does until I get it over into Unity. Also, when I'm working from the outside in, I only make one of everything. I only need one of those pylons. I only need one of those. I only need, one of any particular thing that I'm going to make multiple copies of. The workflow associated with these types of worlds are pretty straightforward. And I'm going to kill the sun and the moon just because I can. I spend a lot of time, after I've come up with the idea for my world, I spend a lot of time finding and or making assets, right? I've got a lot of experience as a 3D modeler. I can model up pretty much anything I can think of. But do I want to spend that time modeling that up? It's a consideration. Sometimes I've even been known to buy a really nice model, even though I could probably model it myself, because it saves me 3 days work. What's the value that you would put on 3 days work? So that's always a consideration. Will the models work? Will the models do what I need them to do? Or the model's going to be too big? Right? I always spend some time looking for models before I decide whether or not I'm going to try and make them. It's always nice to have somebody on your team, and if you're serious about making worlds, I recommend getting a team together. But it's nice to have somebody on your team that can either model in a 3D modeling package, or at least can tell if one model is suitable for another and how to fix it if it's not. Then most of the time, I'm in Unity assembling, animating, laying out, baking the lights. Fluid guy removed his hand raise.
Oh, no. Yeah,
Was that a mistake?
no, I had my hand raised. My question is
Oh.
about building teams. Are you going to talk a little more about how one would go about building a team? I mean, there's a lot of people that have great skills out there, and it's a massive world. So is there a way to distill that down to a resourceful team that can help build your world for you if one's not the expert at doing it?
Sure. Okay, so for everybody that didn't hear the question, um, he was asking about team building. Where do I get my team from? How do I find my team? What kind of skills do I have on my team? Is that a fair assessment of what you were asking about?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Yeah.
so well, one of the good things about Altspace, and there's lots of different social VR platforms or collaborative VR platforms, but one of the best things about Altspace is the community that we have here. There's a rich community of people who all want help, who all have the community mentality, and a lot of them are talented people. So to specifically answer your question, I would start by looking at the Altspace Discord, and then go on these world tours. Daisy Shaw and Mr. Yellow's world tours. Um, Laurel from the Educators in VR, she does a world tour every week where they go around and they look at different worlds. Those world tours are great ways to meet other world builders and to network for other people who have the skills that you may be missing, right? Maybe you've got great ideas for worlds, but you don't know anything about Photoshop and you don't have time to learn Photoshop, right? So you go on one of these tours, go on the Altspace Discord, and maybe ask for somebody that can help you out with some Photoshop, texture manipulation, that sort of stuff. I don't know. Does that help?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, sure. Anybody else got any questions? Yeah.
What room am I in?
You're in my room.
Yeah, like what kind?
Oh, Chuck has a really good suggestion. Where is Chuck? Really good suggestion there, Chuck. Yeah. You want to start with some world building? Everybody in here, friend everybody else. And that would be a really good way to start building your community. And then when you see a friend that you've got online and they look like they're in a pretty interesting world, because one of the downsides, and I'll get to your question in a second, Revolution. One of the downsides of the way Altspace does its world sort of navigation, its sort of world system, is that if there's nobody in the world and you don't know about that world and you don't have it on your favorites list, if there's nobody in it, you can't find it. Because if it's not featured, it's not going to show up on the features list. If nobody's in it, it's not going to show up on popular. So unless you have it favorited, if nobody's in it, you won't be able to find it. So making friends who are interested in world building, following them around to the different worlds that they found, and then favoriting those worlds that you find so that you can go back to them later is a great way to get to know the world system in Altspace. And just when I think I've seen it all, somebody pops up and shows me something just amazing. Also, if you haven't already, I probably should have done this before now. What you want to do is you want to enter the world's beta. So you go to the menu, you go to settings under general, and there's enable world's beta. at the top of that menu. When you enable the world's beta, you'll get the world's tab on your menu, and then you'll be able to go to different worlds. You'll be able to start making worlds. That'll give you access to the world's tools inside of Altspace, and that generally gets you started on your quest. Now, Revolution, sorry, you had a question.
So my question was, what is considered a good size package for a world? I know we have to pay attention to the different sizes, but what would be a good size average that I should be looking at when building a world?
Okay, excellent question. What's a good size? What's a good size for your world, and what you should be looking at for your world when you're determining the size of your world? It depends on if you're going to try and get your world featured. Right. So you remember this scary looking graphic that we had earlier. Those are the requirements if you want to get your world featured. The template can't be any bigger than 10 megabytes. Your kits can't be bigger than 10 megabytes in total. I can't have any more than 200 objects. I can't have a browser unless I do the browser in a really special way. I can't just put a web browser on the wall. I can't have any teleporters. So those are requirements that they have for if I want my world featured. If I don't really care about having my world featured, then it comes down to the audience performance, right? The experience that I want the people that come to my world to have. And there's a different tool that we have for that. So if you look in your menu and you go to settings and you look under display, the second one at the top says show Oculus FPS panel, right? And it's a panel that'll come up in front of your eyes, and the top number is really the number that you're interested in. That's the frames per second. That's how many times your device is able to draw that world as you go through it. Now, in here, we should be getting close to 60 everywhere that you look. So the size of your worlds impact that frame per second. Let's say if I have something that's got 100 megabytes worth of kits, and the template is 30 megabytes, and I've got a bunch of photos in it, and I go in there, and my frames per second drops down to 12 or 15 frames a second. It's going to be horrible. People's devices are going to be crashing, stuttering, overheating. It's awful, right? So if your world is not going to be featured, really, there's no upper limit. There's a practical limit, and it really depends on what you do with it. I can make a world that is 10 megabytes, well, small enough to be featured, but because of what I put in it, nobody can go in there. Because it just, especially on a quest, it just crashes. But it all depends on what you put in it. I know that was a really rambling non-answer to your question.
No, it was great. Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Sure. So yeah, the FPS panel is definitely something you're going to be spending a lot of time looking at, because you want to go everywhere in your world and see what the frame rate is, right? Especially if I want people to have a nice experience in here. I want people to have, maybe I want it to be featured, right? If I want it to be featured, I'm going to have to go all over my world and make sure that I don't drop down below 60 frames per second pretty much anywhere. Yep. Chuck just sent me a message talking about terrains, and we're going to talk about terrains. Terrains do work, but performance-wise, they kill a quest. Yeah, so you might as well. You can put terrains in here, but you might as well not, because that's gonna cut your frame rate in half on a quest. It'd work great on a PC, but not on a quest. Okay. Other questions? Graham, did you have a question?
Yeah. Hi, Carnivore.
Hey.
Hi. So I really appreciate your talk. So you're talking about a team. What would the ultimate team consist of? What team members do you need?
Okay, so you need somebody who's going to lead the team, who's got the idea, who's got the vision, the concept, right? They know what the world is going to be used for. They know how big an audience they're expecting to have, and they're sort of keeping things on track, right? One thing that person's going to be responsible for is making sure that the world gets built within the requirements and that we don't have what they call scope creep, right? It's real easy when I'm building an idea. Like, when me and Brex were building the Batcave and Ghostbusters, probably 2/3 of the things that we talked about doing in there did not make it in there. Somebody that says, no, we can't do that. That's one step too far. You got to have somebody in your team that can do that. You want somebody that knows Unity, somebody that knows how to work with the Unity game engine and understands when Unity gives you an error message, what that's really meaning. So you're going to need somebody that knows Unity and somebody that's at least familiar with 3D modeling slash texturing, right? You don't need to be able to use Photoshop to make a magazine ad, right? You don't have to be a graphic designer, but maybe you need to make some textures. Maybe you need to take some photos off your phone and turn it into a texture for a material. Maybe I need to build a brick wall or something. So yeah, an idea guy or a lack of idea guy, somebody to both come up with the ideas and to rein the ideas in, somebody that can handle modeling, and somebody that can handle Unity. Those are probably the 3 skill sets that you need on your team.
Awesome. Thank you.
Anna had a question. No, you cannot use Unity to code extra features into your world. You can add code elements into a world through MREs, right? But we're probably not going to talk a whole lot about MREs. That's a completely different realm. That's sort of like going back to the pizza analogy. Some people like to put hot pepper flakes and powdered garlic on their pizza. That's probably where the MRE fits in this analogy. It's not the stuff that you bake in the oven. It's the stuff you add to it later. 3D Studio is expensive. If you can get it, if you have an educational email address, if you're a student or an educator, you can get 3D Studio for free by registering through the Autodesk website. In fact, you can get all of their tools for free. If you don't have that, it can be pretty expensive. Alternatives to 3D Studio are 3D Blender is a very powerful and very popular, and I wish I could say it was easy to learn, but it's powerful and popular. But Blender is a good alternative for 3D Studio for making geometry and building your world. You can actually build geometry in Unity. Somebody's going to mention Pro Builder. Well, I could just use Pro Builder and make all this stuff in Unity without using 3D Studio. Pro Builder will kill your template. Pro Builder will break your template because Pro Builder introduces scripts, attaches scripts to your objects in your scene, and the Unity uploader is going to say, no, you can't do that because you can't have any scripts. No scripts. No scripts. Different groups in the same space without one overhearing the other, like in Verbella. Yes, another good question from Anna. Okay, we actually had a use case for this the other day where we wanted different people to be able to have conversations discreetly without being overheard by somebody else. Verbella has a really cool system where I can put like a little fence around an area, and if I'm standing inside that fence, the people outside that fence can't hear me and vice versa. It's really neat. They have no such thing in Altspace. What they do have, though, is distance. So if, say, somebody were standing on top of that ramp over there, or even at the bottom of that ramp, and they did not have megaphone on, we would probably not be able to hear them over here. So when you're designing your spaces in Altspace, and I want some compartmentalized areas, we did a job fair a couple of weeks ago, and we had exactly that. We needed a lot of people to be in the space, but we wanted to have areas where groups of people can move to different areas and have private conversation. And we just did it by distance. So there's a space right over there. You can move yourself apart, and nobody will be able to hear you. Wish we had a better solution for that. Unfortunately, we don't. All right. Any other questions?
Oh, hey, Carnivore.
Yes.
Oh, yes. So, I think you might have heard of this cybersecurity and hacking convention called DEF CON that
Yeah.
happens to be in Las Vegas like every year. So, like, I'm from the same team that is gonna plan this all of this thing. just because of this coronavirus situation, we definitely cannot have this physical convention right away. So like,
Absolutely.
is it possible to like have some sort of crowd of, like you can say, 10,000 people on Alt VR at one time?
10,000 people.
Oh yeah,
The
like each year we get around 25,000 or so people like in 4 days for this stuff. So
well,
like, is it
I mean, Altspace has things that they can use to accommodate large groups of people, right? They can do something called front rowing. There's, say the cap on here is 30 people, right? And I can ask real nicely, and they'll up that cap to 50, 80. Well, if I ask really nice, they might up it to 100. I've seen them up certain worlds to 100, but that's still only 100 people. But they can take something, they can take that world and they can make duplicates of that world, as many
okay? So
duplicates as they need.
like mirror world of itself, you can say.
Yep, a mirror world of itself, right? So we could have one world that's got 100 people in it. We could have
Okay.
another world that's got 100 different people in it. We could have another
Okay.
world that's got, say, 50 different people in it. And if I'm the presenter, all three of those worlds would be able to see me. Everybody in all three of those worlds would hear me, be able to see me, be able to ask me questions. But people in World A, for instance, would not be able to see, hear, or talk to people in World B or C. They would still only see the small group that they're with.
Okay, but like you as a presenter would be able to like answer to all the questions that somebody's gonna ask. So is
That's
that
right.
possible?
Yeah.
Great.
I would so
So
I would see the hand raises in all the different rooms, right? And I also have to have redundant moderators. So I've got moderators in here, but I would have to have moderators in all of my other rooms because they're not presenters, they're only in one room.
okay, so I've been like searching for some tutorials on how like we can create custom world and other stuff. So
Mhm.
like I have a little bit of experience with these Blender 3D and Unity 3D as well. So
Mhm.
what according to you would be like it would take to create some hotel-ish world for the convention? Like how much time would it actually take to test everything and all?
Well, so you're going to do a hotel, right? And you want it to
Like
look like a
we go
specific
for,
hotel,
yeah, we go for like Baileys every year. So I'm not
right?
like very sure about like we're gonna replicate Baileys because that would like create some sort of shit for us as well. So like
Yeah.
generally, how long it actually takes to like make these worlds like texturing and other stuff?
Well, all right. So a lot of that's going to depend on your own skill level and the where you're getting your objects from. Um, if I've got the objects and I don't have to model the object, right? If I've got the
Yeah.
objects, I can put a world together pretty quickly, a day or two. But
Oh
if I
yeah.
don't have the objects and I have to find the objects, or especially if I have to make the objects, that can go from days, that can stretch out to weeks pretty easily. Especially if
So
you're
like
talking about a hotel.
yeah, yeah.
Um, if you want it to look like a specific real world place, that's gonna take an extra level of effort because you're gonna have to get floor plans, you're gonna have to get reference photos, you probably have to go there with a tape measure for something. And
Yeah.
then you've got the considerations. You got to get permission from whoever home. If you want it to look exactly like the hotel, branded and everything, you need to get permission from the owner of the hotel before you can use
Yeah,
any of
yeah,
it.
yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so sounds great. So like we're gonna have this everything up for like August, mid-August or something like 15 or 16.
Good
So
luck.
starting from scratch, like it would it be like possible for us to like do all of this within the span of like from today to like 27th of August or so?
Without knowing the skill level of the people that you have available to you and on your team, that's hard to say. But I would be nervous if I only had a month.
Oh shit. Okay. So thanks a lot, man. Like
I mean,
it's
I
been a
can
great
build.
help.
A
Yeah,
lot of
yeah.
it depends on the subject matter, right? I can build a world, a fantasy world, where it doesn't have to be any particular size. It doesn't have to look like anything. I can build that very quickly. What's making your use case challenging is the requirement that it look like a specific hotel.
No. We are not looking for anything like very specific to some sort of actual architectural space, but anything
Oh,
that
well,
works.
that simplifies things.
You see that space like behind you. I see like five LEDs and stuff. So something like convention halls, or you can say the conference halls. Like you must have been to college, I believe. So like
Yeah,
the lecture
once or
halls.
twice.
So somewhat similar. We'll be having like 30 lecture halls or so. That would like we can mirror them. So that is how it's gonna work.
Okay, well, that should work a little bit better than trying to make something that looks. I thought you were talking about a specific hotel. Like I had a
No,
guy
no, no.
ask me the other day if I could do the Omni shorefront in Washington D.C.
Okay, great. So like
Yeah,
where can I find
not in
you
alt
on?
space. I don't think I can.
Yeah. So like can I can I find you on Twitter or something?
Uh, Probably the best place to get a hold of me is on the Altspace Discord.
Okay. So you go by the same name, Carnivore?
Yep, I'm carnivore.
Okay, great. So like thanks, man. So I'll
Yep,
catch you up there over there.
sure. And somebody mentioned just a minute ago, Altspace does have some really good templates, right? So I would recommend taking a look at the Altspace template. Also, Mr. Prime has an excellent conference hall. If you're interested in using something like that, if it doesn't have to be custom built from scratch, you can probably look around and see if you can find something that'll suit your need. But feel free to hit me up. Let me know if I can help you in any way. MJQ02 had a hand raise.
You see it on the thing.
Yeah. Fluid Sky, did you have another one?
I just had this may be a naive question, but building these worlds that are not super sophisticated and going back to your point about building a team, is it normal convention that people charge to build these worlds once you assemble your team, or does it depend on people having common interest whether they would charge to create these worlds for, together?
It depends. It really all depends, right? If you well, before you can charge for anything, you got to have somebody that's willing to buy it. So most of the worlds that I build on Altspace are just for fun. I do have some that I've built professionally, so I do get paid to build worlds on Altspace, but I don't do it as carnivore. I do it as I have a different account.
Now, what I meant
So if you
was
see,
when you create a world, you're not trying to make money from it, but when you
mm,
assemble these teams, is it normal convention that people will help create these worlds free without, and then creating the event for that world? You're not trying to do it for a profit or anything like that. So
right at this level, we're talking about enthusiasts and who have an
exactly,
enthusiasm and a genuine desire to just create and share. Right,
yeah,
that's what's
common
driving.
interest,
Yeah,
right? Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Is that
I'm
is that
I'm not
pretty
saying
normal?
that making money is outside of the question. It's just not usually the way, or not usually the reason. A lot of the people that build worlds build worlds.
Got it. I see. I see.
Well, we have
Thank you.
killed this entire time, which is good because I'm completely out of material at this point. Did you have another question,
Yes.
Revolution?
So regarding the building the world, so is it possible to advertise in a world if you build a world? If you wanted to
It's
advertise a product in the world you built, would that be out of the question, or is that okay?
I yeah. You have an answer, please?
I have a pretty good answer. There's been This stuff like what you're talking about that Google and Sony has thought about. Like Sony had a proposal about putting a advertisement around your screen, and Google proposed that they actually put advertisements like you pay the person who built that world or whoever the company who made it, they would pay them to put their actual products on buildings, like what you would see in New
Mhm.
York on the side of a bus stop. You'll see a McDonald's ad for a quarter pounder. Well,
Right.
that's what they were hoping to do with like newer games that are coming out. Like supposedly GTA 5 is supposed to be coming out in VR.
Right.
Mhm.
Right. Right. And then there's other games like Space Pirate Trainer has ads for other games in it all over the place, right? But is that an Altspace? Is that okay in Altspace? Is the question. I mean, does it violate the Altspace EULA if I put a Coca-Cola banner on the side of my building and charge Coke $1,000 a month to do that?
There you
Yeah, I think that's gonna have to like that's a bit questionable because I don't know if there's actually any regulations or laws about it. And plus, this is a pretty new thing about putting ads in games with VR
Yeah.
being a new thing.
Yeah.
So I think
I
it's like
somehow.
it's a good idea to wait to see
Yeah.
what's gonna happen.
Yeah, I think it's certainly within the realm of possibility, but I suspect that somebody from Facebook or Oculus would want to get their hands on that if
Yeah.
we started advertising on their
go.
platform. I don't know. I'm just guessing. Anyway, well, thanks everybody for showing up. Thanks for sticking around. Thanks for the questions. Thanks for the participation. Chuck has been really pressing hard for me to make a channel out of this. So let's talk about what's involved in there. And then Thursday afternoon, we're going to be talking about setting up a project with Unity and how to work with Unity to build these worlds. And I'll be repeating that on next Monday. So thanks, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, man.
Absolutely.
I'm gonna explore now.
Great job.